Hi, everybody. If you're watching the recording, we just started a little bit early. You could scroll up in maybe 10 minutes if I'm not sure if all this beginning is going to be impacted or not for you. So we're just getting started here. It's about 10 minutes before the broadcast, and we're just getting things set up. So if you're watching the archive, you can just probably just speed up to the beginning. Hey, Melissa. Oh no. Um, I just sent. Well, this is the new one. Oh yeah, I sent it a long time ago. That's right. Maybe that was the old one. Yeah. I'm worried about going back, um, and then losing the broadcast. Then we lose all 90. It's a good sign. Nope, that's not it. Let me see you. Um, Let me look for it too. I think it came from Webinar Ninja, right? Okay. That might be it. Hey, Jason. You're on as a guest. All right, let me just see here. Share your screen, upload slides, settings. 'Don't want to hit that button. Kelly's here. Let's see if I think we sent it the 14th. I just found something here. I'm playing around with webinar closing. Receive an invite. It's in my inbox. You responded to me on the 14th. this. I have a picture of it, but I don't know. Is that what you have? Hmm. Hmm. Oh, hi, Jean Marie. I got your note. We're having technical issues here, so we're early still, but we're just trying to get Melissa on. Hmm. Oops. So I guess what we could do is try. We have some people on. We can just put you up to the mic over the phone. You want to try that? Let me see. I have like Jason and Shannon on. So Jason and Shannon, if you're listening to me, um, just I'm going to put Melissa on speaker. See if you can hear her through the microphone. So
Hi, everybody. Melissa Lambert here.
can you hear? Yes. Shannon says yes. So how about if we do that, Melissa?
That sounds great.
Okay. Maybe I sent you the wrong link.
I don't know. It worked before.
We could do is, well, I don't know. You think that'll interfere? Could FaceTime too, but I don't know if that'll matter.
Yeah.
Audio is fine. Alexis is here. Hi, Alexis. So you can see who's chatting though, right?
I can.
Okay, good. So you can participate in chat.
Perfect. This is perfect for the context, right?
Yeah, yeah. And Scott's here. Hi, Scott. And Faye, Monique.
Hey.
Monique is here. You know Monique, right?
Yes. Oh, wonderful. Hi, Jean Marie.
And Kelly from District 15, Deputy Superintendent for New York City. I spoke with Melissa and she shared that it was okay to share the link, of course.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining, Kelly.
District
So we
15.
may have a lot of Kellys.
I love it. It's awesome.
So everyone can hear Melissa okay? If you can't, just let me know on the chat. So I have her right next to my microphone because we had a technical glitch. Good, she can hear you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kelly.
So Alexis says she shared some of with our, yes, Alexis, they actually had some sign up. So, and thanks for letting us know you can hear. So this morning I woke up to about a half a dozen trucks outside my window who decided to cut trees and put a wood chipper in front of my house. You can't plan these things. But they moved down the street, thank God.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, Mario.
And Martin.
Wow, you have a fire in the Catalinas, huh, Jason?
Rich.
Wow.
Hi, Rich.
Rich is here. Hey, Rich. Wow. Is it still burning, Jason, in the Catalinas? Hi, Martha. Martha, I haven't seen you in so long. I'm so glad you're here. It's good to see you.
Hi,
Nadine.
Amy, Daniela, and Jason.
Yeah.
Thousands of acres,
Wow.
horrible.
Wow.
It's early.
It is. It's been hot in Arizona here. Wow, lightning, huh? I just want to show everyone. This is my cup given to me for my 55th birthday this year from
Oh, I love it.
my daughters.
So cool.
So we'll start in 1 minute. We're just getting everyone on. And Melissa's going to join us by phone because we had a technical problem, but I don't think that's going to. Thanks, Alexis.
Just saw that.
So we anticipate people joining us. Hi, Robin. Kevin McGuire, hi. Martin's on. Now, Kevin McGuire, I used to cut his grass when I was a young man, like 14 years old, maybe 15 years old. Yes. And if I didn't do a good job, he made me do it over again. Hi, Jennifer.
And Robin.
Katie.
Robin's here. Hi, sweetie.
So it's 2:00. We're going to get started. We want to thank everyone for coming on to our webinar. We were actually very overwhelmed by the positive response. We had 95 people actually register. Hi, Bob. Bob is on. So I'm going to say hello to people as they come on into the chat. And what I'd just like to do to introduce, I went into teaching because it's an intimate experience, and we're at our best when we can stand close to students, examine their work, give them hugs and high fives, and have private conversations. And we lost that this spring due to the COVID shutdown. And the pandemic has forced us to confront some unprecedented challenges. And teachers, principals, and school support staff are doing great work to offer stability for students and their families during this crisis by providing meals and home learning activities and online instruction. And what I have seen throughout, just with my friends and how they're dealing with their families and their students, has just been overwhelming. So I would just like to say thank you for joining us. I hope we can give you some good information that you can take back. This is all designed around helping you take action and leadership actions to mitigate a possible COVID loss. So we're going to look at some of the research and actually give you some frameworks that you can take back with you. So the challenge that we have is, how do we unlearn that there's a single winning scenario to plan for a return to school, because there's no playbook. So the first thing we'd like to do is actually have you all say hello to each other. So if you could just please, in the chat, type in your name and tell us where you're from. I know some people are joining with their leadership team. And if you could tell us, what district you're from and if you're with a team or not, and say hello to each other. We would just like to know. I know we've had people from all over the United States on the webinar today. So Christina is principal at PS 94. Kerry Knight, Delaware, Department of Ed.
That's right, Delaware.
Renell's here from Colorado. Oh, it's going so fast now that I hope you all can keep up. Scott from Dodge City, Kansas. Jason.
Yay, Bob Manley.
Wow. Christine. And
Marvin.
Shannon. You may recognize a name there. Shannon Sassone's on. She's my daughter. She's from Brooklyn as well.
Brooklyn's in the house.
She's coming
today,
to cheer me on. Adelia from Tucson.
Oh, yeah. PS 130.
So this is great. Thank you so much for saying hello to everybody. And we're so happy. We have principals and superintendents and assistant superintendents on the line, directors. We have teachers on the line. So thank you so much for joining us. Let me introduce you myself. My name is Joe Sassone. I've been in education for over 30 years. I started on Long Island, where I was actually a special ed teacher in Virginia for a year when we had the recession back in the early 90s. And then I was a guidance counselor and assistant principal on Long Island. Then I moved to Tucson, Arizona in 1999 to raise my family. And I ended up becoming the assistant superintendent for the Vail Unified School District. And I had the privilege to work with them. When I moved there, we had 3,000 students, and right now they're up to 15,000. We were building schools every single year. And I had the privilege to lead them. And my goal was to really turn the district around because we were a low performing district in Tucson at that time. And then in 2006, I was offered a job at a nonprofit named West Ed out of San Francisco. And I was the senior director for our school and district transformation services. And then last year, I worked for a small company out of Harvard to help school districts think about chronic absenteeism and how to use behavioral insights to do that. So I'm going to introduce Melissa.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. How apropos that we are having technical glitches, but that's okay, because that's how we roll. So first, we're honored to have this time to share with you rapidly changing and complex time. We want to offer materials and tools that are founded on an equitable approach and designed to increase integrated instruction and ultimately dismantle segregated instruction. My name is Melissa Lambert. I'm from New York. I'm broadcasting from my home in Brooklyn. I spent the bulk of my 20 years in San Francisco Unified as a teacher, district supervisor, 4 wonderful years in a rural district in Northern California as a high school administrator and principal, most recently with West Ed as a senior engagement manager for English Learner Services. And of course, a quick shout out to all my wonderful colleagues here. Extended school closure are not new to me. For those colleagues who are on the phone, who are experienced the devastating wildfires in California and also currently in Arizona, my former school where I was once principal, the students who graduated in 2019 did so with the distinction of having not gone a single year of high school without a wildfire-related shutdown. We learned 3 things that resonate today. First, our students are learning now, and they're resilient. And intentionally designed instruction can help transfer these soft or non-cognitive skills and honor their experiences to bridge toward authentic, relevant, meaningful academic practice. The second thing we learned is to really, truly invest in a social emotional response structure. And that's for staff, and it includes triage, partnerships with families, community-based organizations, and knowing that you'll be responding to waves of invest in a collaboration and communication structure. Sometimes we call this a PLC, with an emphasis on high quality, relevant, integrated instruction with targeted support and professional learning to inspire collective activity. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Hey, I just want to say hello to everybody else who came in from Brooklyn Public Schools, 130, 38, Kimberly Danson. Thanks for coming on. So I just want to say hello to everybody while we get started. Um, and what I'd like to do is just in the chat today, if you can just talk a little bit about, just in a one word description, but what brought you to the webinar today? What would be a win for you today? So if you can just share that in the chat.
MSADA. I can't say enough, Jacqueline. You'll get a shout out from me later.
It's a feeling like we're not alone with the long road ahead that we need to make this possible, dealing with uncertainty. Reassurance that our kids will come. Taking our current experience and do we need to do this again? Do it better? Urgency. A new leadership role during the pandemic. Strategic partnerships for at-risk groups.
Better understanding of student autonomy. Very good. Summer planning.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing, everybody. I just, as you continue to share and read each other's chat, I would just like to kind of just give an overview logistically of what this webinar platform looks like. So what you'll see is underneath the slides, if you scroll up a little bit, you will see 3 tabs. So the 3 tabs are questions. So these are questions that you can ask during the session if you wanted to, if you have a question, if something arose. So Melissa and I can tackle that when we do our question and answer session. Also, we have a polls tab. We're not going to use any polls today, but we also do have an offer tab. And then of course, everyone is in the chat and you're all doing that now. So that's where the chat is. You can reduce the chat by just hitting that icon. But if you scroll down and just give me a thumbs up if you see this, you can see if you just actually, and hopefully you can see this, if you just hit the poll tab, and I'm sorry, if you hit the offer tab, you'll see download resources. So if you hit that, you will go right to our website. And we have 3 resources for you to download. One is, and let me just, you'll see this. You will see a download for our notes for today's session, and that all comes up on a PDF file for you. You will also have a COVID-19 learning recovery guide. So this will help you with a term that we go through today around accelerated learning, what you could do with your curriculum guides and pacing schedules before the fall. And then you'll get a paper that Melissa wrote called Responding to Education for Multilingual and Culturally Diverse Learners After COVID-19. So this goes into pretty much detail, everything that we're going to talk about today and looking at a framework for working with multilingual and ELL learners. So that is free for you and to download. So that's how you get those resources, by just hitting that. And it looks like a lot of thumbs up are coming up. So people are actually getting into the resources. So this is a little bit about us. We are fostering quality schools. So Melissa and I started and with Mario's on, we started a company. And because we're former educators and we were in the field for a long time as consultants as well, we wanted to be able to offer something for school leaders and district leaders around this unprecedented time that we're in. So what we're going to continue to do is have this dialogue. And what we want to offer is a couple more webinars. We would love to hear for some topics that you would be interested in that we can present and get experts in for you to listen to. So we would like to offer the next one on June 25th and then another one in July. But we're also going to put together some short videos, 10-minute videos called Lunch and Learns. And these will be bite-sized professional development that we could send to you and you can watch at your leisure. We're also going to have a series called The Return Chronicles, where we interview people from all over the country about what their plans are, what their challenges are as school opens. So we can give everyone as many ideas as possible. We also offer academies, a Fostering Quality Schools Academy, a multilingual academy, and we also have access through our partnership with WISEPS, which is through the University of Wisconsin, to surveys to measure leadership practices across the school, and also measure multilingual and ELL practices across the school and the district as well. So those are some of the services that we offer. So 3 ways to get the most from our presentation. If you have your notes up in the PDF file, just take notes on some actions that you can implement quickly. So we design this purposely. So there's some things you can take away and do tomorrow or today. And think of one question you would like us to answer, and you can post that in the question box below. And then decide on one action. We'll ask you this at the end of the webinar, one action that you plan to complete in the next 24 hours. So we're going to go through 3 leadership actions to mitigate. So we're going to talk a little bit about accelerated learning, and we're actually encouraging districts and schools not to go through remediation programs, and we'll tell you why. We also want to go through a framework that Melissa developed to leverage synchronous and asynchronous delivery types for distance and in-person learning. And then we put together with my friend Rich Bernardo, who's on, he helped me kind of think this out, support your team with a decision matrix as you develop a learning loss strategy. So we want to share all those resources with you. So let's get started. So this framework, I call the return, just by looking at, these are all the families who are working in low pay fields are going to be the hardest hit by the economic impact of COVID. And they're experiencing higher rates of food insecurity, family instability, and other shocks from disruption. We're also seeing a term when we dealt with chronic absenteeism called doubling up, where families are living with other families. That's also on the rise. So when you think about the return, your number one priority, of course, is going to be the physical environment to prevent a COVID outbreak. Some of those scenarios are starting to emerge now. Actually, in my home state, they just released recommendations this morning. The second thing, and you're going to have to really have a good, strong plan for, is the social emotional health and supports for children. And those are going to have to come in play because of all the economic impacts that are occurring, and supporting students' social and emotional needs are going to be a priority for all of us. And given the likelihood of blended learning for many students, as well as periodic returns to fully remote learning, because of the spread of COVID-19, school systems need to ensure that grade level content is an academic priority for in-person and remote instruction. So how do you leverage your technology where age appropriate and linked to specific learning objectives? Of course, you're going to have to continue to attend to basic needs, equitable supports for all learners, and really develop powerful partnerships for families. This is going to force school districts and school leaders to really rethink, how do we engage our families? So these are all the things that school leaders are going to have plans for. And what's really important about this is that you're going to be faced with waves of decision making, and at different types of the day, and you're going to have to be ready, and you're going to have to be nimble, because most likely you will have to change on a dime. So I'll give you an example. A church that I go to was ready to open on Sunday. They sent an email out late yesterday saying they cannot open because their staff was actually infected with COVID. So I think we're going to see much more of this when things start and then stop, unfortunately. So we're going to have to be ready for all those contingency plans. So if you can just put in the chat one word that describes how you feel about starting school after COVID-19 this fall? Anxious, terrified, nervous, scared, upset, anxious, ready. I saw ready.
Yes. Hopeful. Definitely confusion abound, anxiety abound.
Yeah, so these are very uncertain times. And my town was just declared a hotspot for COVID yesterday. So things will change very quickly for all of us. What we'd like to do is just kind of have you share also about, do you have plans for a restart, and when you reopen, what does that scenario look like? So here's we're either going to have remote learning that's going to continue, or we're going to have hybrid openings. That's what was announced in my home state in South Carolina this morning. There's going to be hybrid openings with remote learning and in-person learning, with specific guidelines from the CDC, and then in-person openings as well. There are some school districts in Arizona who announced plans that they will go back in person 4 days a week. And then they will have distance learning on Fridays. But there'll always be a chance of rolling closures. So we have some plan for remote openings, in person and remote, hybrid. Yep, we're hearing a lot of that. So this is what makes your strategies even more complex, is that you're going to have to be ready for in-person and remote learning. And then we could go back to full closures again if COVID continues to impact our population. So Marcia said in-person, blended, and distance on Fridays. So these scenarios are beginning to emerge across the country. So that's really, thank you for everybody it's really interesting to see the different scenarios. So at the end of we put together a decision matrix so you can start planning on different types of models for remote learning, hybrid opening, as you think about strategies, specifically when you think about the COVID learning loss. So let's just talk a little bit about the research around COVID learning loss. The first piece is around unfinished learning. This was developed by the Achieve the Core. Christina Allison wrote a blog in December of 2017. Basically, unfinished learning refers to any prerequisite knowledge or skills that students need for future mastery that they don't have yet. It's the same concept that we've all kind of used as educators that we call gaps. But the term unfinished learning is a preferred term because it inspires action rather than focusing on student deficits. So not all unfinished learning has the same effect on students' ability to access grade level content, but in some cases, it simply requires more time or effort from students. So this is really something to pay attention to when I share a little bit more about the research around this concept around unfinished learning. When you look at summer learning loss, Duke University education professor Harris Cooper, he's one of the nation's foremost experts on summer learning slide. He said that the COVID learning loss will result from students spending nearly double the amount of time away from the classroom this year in comparison with a typical 10-week summer break. Cooper and his team, they conducted a meta-analysis that included 39 studies, and they found that summer loss was equal to 1 month of grade level learning that took place during the school year. And his analysis also found that summer learning loss was more detrimental to young children in math and reading. And when you look at all the research that I showed today, that seems to be a common thread. The loss to learning is more detrimental to younger children in math and in reading. The study also showed that low-income students are more at risk for summer learning loss. And then we have the COVID learning loss. So the Northwest Evaluation Association, which is NWEA, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, did a release study in April where they looked at almost 5 million children from 2018 results of their internal assessments. And they predict that students will return to school in the fall of 2020 with roughly 70% of the learning gains in reading relative to a school year. And in math, it's going to be worse. They expect the COVID-19 slide will be greater and children will likely return with less than 50% of the learning gains in some grades. So nearly a full year behind what we would observe in normal conditions. So this COVID slide will likely be the greatest among students who are already at educational or social risk. So when you combine a summer loss, this COVID loss of missing almost 3 months of instruction, and then also the concept of unfinished learning, there can be a profound impact on our students. So there is a study that was released in June 2018 where they actually looked at the long run effects of teacher strikes in Argentina. And this is something to kind of pay attention to. They found that teacher strikes in Argentina had a negative impact on the income of students who are now in their 30s. They lost almost 80 to 90 days of instruction when they were children. And those deficits extended to their children. So it became a generational impact. And that research also suggests that lost learning in the early grades had the biggest impact. Another research to look at is post-Katrina. New Orleans schools, if you remember, closed abruptly in early August 2005. And a majority of the children weren't back in New Orleans schools until the following year, sometimes after that, after a year. All returning students suffered hurricane-related trauma. Some had gone to school for a few months in Texas, others in different parts of Louisiana. But most of them were out of school until they returned to New Orleans. So the educators in a post-Katrina, what did they learn? So this is really important for us to consider because this is a very recent case for us. First, that most students came back on average more than 2 years below grade level, and some much more. Losses were dramatic in mathematics. And it's confirming what NWEA said. It's confirming what summer learning loss. And the degree of learning loss couldn't be predicted by family income or prior school or student age or pre-Katrina grade levels. And it took them multiple years of individualized attention to resolve some of the largest learning losses. So schools that focus mostly, and this is really important to consider, schools that focus mostly on skill recovery rather than teaching grade level content, they found that students were less engaged and they scored poorly on state assessments. But what happened was that it compounded the learning loss. So students actually were falling more and more behind when they were just receiving remediation. So the lesson here is that where schools got better results, they use an accelerated learning approach. So TNTP has done a lot of work around this, and I'll explain a little bit more what that work is if you're not familiar with it. This required that students consistently receive grade level materials, tasks, and assignments along with appropriate scaffolds to make the work accessible. So this is a really important takeaway for everyone to consider. Is you want to accelerate learning, don't remediate. So what does that mean? What does accelerate mean? Let me just switch the slide here. So accelerated learning, this all comes out of the opportunity myth from 2018. So instead of sending students backwards to fill in the potential gaps or unfinished learning, leaders and teachers need to focus on filling in only the most critical gaps, and not in isolation, but the moment they're needed. And it's not, we don't want to rush to diagnostic assessments. So you will see a lot of the assessment companies right now saying that you need this. And I kind of plead with you, don't buy anything until you have a plan. And the diagnostic assessments may be important, but you need to determine what students have lost during remote instruction in order to remediate their learning. And we do know that addressing unfinished learning or gaps through 9 weeks of remediation from Katrina will compound the loss, and it won't work. So accelerated learning basically means it requires that students consistently receive grade level materials. And that's what you want to consider as an anchor strategy when you think about a return to school this fall. How can you guarantee that all students receive consistent grade level materials and tasks and assignments, either in a remote environment or an in-person environment? So here are some actions that you could take to mitigate a COVID learning loss. And then we're going to share a framework. Make a commitment and anchor your strategy to ensure grade level instruction is an academic priority despite your return scenario. Don't rush to use diagnostic assessments to determine what students have lost during remote instruction in order to remediate their learning. Use formative assessment practices to determine next steps in instruction and knowledge, skills, and language acquisition. Let the teachers do the great work that they do and let them use formative assessment practices. There's some really good work on formative assessment through a lot of different companies. At WestEd, we had a strong program there, and I can help you look at some resources around formative assessment if you need that. And you want to provide an additional layer of support, especially to multilingual learners and special ed students during this time. And what we're also finding is students with disabilities, they need that in-person touch with a teacher. So that should probably be a big part of your strategy as well. So what can you do now? So these are in your resources, and I kind of have a steps that you can go through to do this. Adapt your scope and sequence and pacing guide now. Prioritize the most critical prerequisite skills and knowledge for each subject area and grade level. You can do this with your units and your pacing guides so everyone understands what prerequisite skills are needed for that grade level mastery. Plan your approach to diagnosing students' unfinished learning through formative assessment, and give teachers permission to adjust their pacing calendars to add in additional lessons for critical prerequisite skills. That's a really important piece. I know when I was an assistant superintendent, we had teachers on a pretty strict pacing guide, but I think we're going to need to give them leverage and make some decisions so teachers can go back and adjust some of these guides. So this comes from Christina Allison as well. Here are some things, again, these are your resources. Train your school and leaders in the following. Help them understand, diagnose, and act. So understanding is studying the priority standards or the essential standards for an upcoming unit. Make sure they identify, hopefully it's already done for them, critical prerequisite skills, and have them diagnose, determine student understanding of prerequisites based on formative data, and determine if gaps exist for the whole class or small group. So you can either act through whole class needs or small group needs. So Melissa is going to share a framework specifically and especially for multilingual learners, how you can do this ACT piece, either in person or remotely. So I'm going to hand this over to you, Melissa, and I'm going to just take a look at some of the chats.
Thank you. And I'm really sorry about the audio here. I wish because I got all dressed up. So thank you so much, Joe. We know that multilingual and those who have been particularly vulnerable during this time will need an additional layer of support. So let's unpack this accelerate, not remediate notion. So first, we advocate for integrated instruction with targeted support for multilingual learners. And we want to think about this model really for any type of segregated group or students excluded from grade level instruction. So integrated instruction refers to core courses inclusive of multilingual learners practicing alongside their English proficient peers using grade level materials. Targeted support refers to planned instruction that amplifies English language development and literacy that directly supports the integrated instruction. And I want to emphasize that the language and tools that multilingual learners will need are there to help them participate fully and independently in all academic settings. So the model that we're going to share in two parts really is based on research and evidence for remote language learning for multilingual learners, principles of co-teaching, formative assessments, and social emotional learning, particularly as instruction incorporates the process for learners to acquire and participate and learn new knowledge and mindsets and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions. So that's really looking at this as integrated social and emotional learning, and to leverage relevant and responsible engagement through academic discourse. So first, we should understand factors, emphasis, and benefits of two delivery models. And that is what you see on the screen. You're not expected to read this from the screen. This is in your handout, but we wanted to point out how these two columns work together. So understanding the foundation, we look at synchronous learning, which is simultaneous whole group in real time where students and teachers are interacting. Asynchronous, which does not take place simultaneously. All students work independently with some support. And note that they're not mutually exclusive. So what we're advocating for is the reciprocity between the two, and you can see the arrow there. So we'll talk about each one individually, but certainly when you're reviewing or thinking about a blended or hybrid models of return, whatever the term, it's important to know each delivery type, emphasis on content and language learning through meaningful grade level discourse. So before I jump into this, we're interested, what kinds of instructional delivery have you been engaging learners in school closures right now? Has it been primarily synchronous? Has it been primarily asynchronous? Or have you been working with a blend of the two?
So both.
Good.
Combination of both, a blend. So we're seeing a lot of blending.
Good. Yeah, definitely a focus on connection. I can speak from my experience in Brooklyn. That's really been a push to make sure there's connection and communication.
Robin says asynchronous due to a lack of technology. I'm not sure if you see that.
Yes, that's really important, actually, and will come up as part of the factors. Great. So in your handout, if you want to look a little more closely, in my experience with rolling closures, that they came around regularly, and that I'm speaking from the wildfire closures and having to kind of close immediately. The classes that had the most success with learning and communication already had a clear understanding of these few principles, and they were nimble. Foundational instructional components include having clear learning intentions, high quality interactive instruction and flexibility for delivery, assessments that take place after some teaching and learning has been done, a high quality relevant curriculum that utilizes a moderated discussion board and a graded discussion board. So hugely important are the equitable talk structures to ensure student voice and a collaborative team of teachers. This all is under the umbrella of ongoing family communication. Most educational systems have these variations in place, but it's time to put them all together. So if you could go back to the other table real quick,
Sure.
Joe.
Sorry.
That's okay. We offer this table to really think about the underpinnings and look at some of the factors. We know that in synchronous learning, affective filters are high. So have your social emotional learning hat on at all times and really think about the way that the emphasis can be put on formative assessment and real-time feedback, particularly through academic discourse. It necessitates some co-planning and co-delivery. And the benefits are you can record these synchronous sessions to be viewed later in asynchronous time, and that really provides that needed in-person interaction during synchronous. During asynchronous time, let's look at the right-hand column. All students are working independently. We know that frustration levels can be very high. It necessitates quality review of materials, and certainly it's not time-bound. All of these lessons can be pre-recorded and shared, and it's a great opportunity in both regards for multilingual learners to practice L1, first language, and L2, new language. And the use of discussion boards has been very powerful in this. So we want to think about that this benefit to asynchronous time can often involve some machine-generated immediate feedback, and then also practice with independent level and an increase of self-monitoring. So to achieve this instruction, we want be well-planned, have high-quality instructional sequence, it's responsive, relevant, engaging with both texts and tasks. And instruction must encourage that social construction of language through scaffolded interaction with a focus away from teacher-centered pedagogy and more towards learner autonomy. So what stands out to you with these delivery types? You've already been throwing those in the chat. I'm kind of monitoring those. And we want to think about what this looks like early grades, but also what this looks like in a scenario. A couple of notes before we jump into the next slide. You can switch to the next slide. As we look at what this looks like balanced in an approach, we'll want to think about students leading some of these synchronous sessions. And really the beauty of that allows for some incredible in-person formative assessment and looking back to targeted support. So for multilingual learners and acceleration, not remediation, we advocate for integrated instruction with a balance of synchronous and asynchronous session that focuses on collaboration, support, communication. And now more than ever, multilingual learners must have equitable access to grade level, rigorous, relevant, and effective integrated instruction with targeted support. Maximum supports to avoid frustration. So as we look at this arrow from left to right, First, you'll see whole group instruction. That's that integrated time. It includes all students in a real-time synchronous session. The session is co-planned and co-facilitated with core teachers and English learner experts who can facilitate students through a Socratic seminar, a fishbowl activity, and thinking about how that integrated time is really relevant and responsive to student needs. So as you move across to targeted instruction, it's also synchronous time. It can take place within the integrated session, before the integrated session, with small groups of multilingual learners. It could take place after the integrated session, all in support of rich and rigorous integrated texts and tasks. Moving along the arrow at the top, you see that independent practice and an asynchronous time, where students respond on their own with varied levels of supports, such as office hours, recorded sessions, and always with communication. And then, of course, monitoring. So being able to monitor synchronous and asynchronous work can really be done well through those approved platforms. And we know that for all students' progress, monitoring is important. For multilingual learners and English learners, it's the law. So utilizing those platforms, frequency of communication, and thinking about how to include multiple perspectives, including student voice. So what stands out to you about this model, and what questions or implications might it have for your practice?
There is a question, if you look at it's from Kelly's, I think Magda also had a question. If you look at that too, as people are chatting.
Types of technology. Oh, yes. So types of technology, we're using the term platform because there are so many right now. Specifically, we've seen some great use of Flipgrid, where students recording themselves and having peers respond to those prompts.
That was Flipgrid? Flipgrid?
Yeah, Flipgrid. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Maria.
Yes, thank you. And Magda had a really great question. It was about diagnostics, specifically given created to measure learning on essential skills. So I know that there are variations in educational standards by state. Many states have taken the core standards and redeveloped and realigned. However, I think if we're talking specifically right now about multilingual learners, we're looking at those disciplinary practices, disciplinary language, all of the literacy skills that are aimed to help students participate independently in any academic setting. So I know that's really broad, but Magda specifically, I think your concern and question deserves much more investigation, and certainly types of technology. We could put together some samples and examples post-webinar that we've observed to be really effective in terms of increasing academic discourse, use of disciplinary language, and analytical practices. Great. And I see some people are saying peer teaching, co-teaching. This work ultimately cannot be done alone. This is not really, this model is not set up to be separate from that. When we talk about accelerating learning and applying an asynchronous, synchronous balance for integrated instruction, it really necessitates a group of teachers, or at least a pair of teachers, working together toward the same learning outcomes and learning goals. Great.
Are we ready for the next slide, Melissa?
Yes, ready for the next slide.
So we already have a couple of, just a couple of basic questions. If anybody has any questions for me or Melissa, we'd be happy to answer some of them now. And you can post those either in the question, in the open questions, or post right into the chat. Also, some people ask, and I'll just ask these real quick. We will give you these slides if you would like them. Some of you are asking if you can get the slides from the presentation. So we'd be happy to get you that. So we can email that to you all and actually post it. Actually, we'll post it on our website and send you a direct link so you can download it. So we would definitely get you that. And then Kimberly Danson asks, Melissa, what advice can I give school leaders on what actions to take this summer to ensure the first 60 to 90 days of school run smoothly?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think really planning for multiple scenarios with a specific underpinning and deep knowledge of what needs to be essential and foundational. The high quality curriculum, the social emotional response, thinking about how some of these emotional experiences are going to be shared and how we bridge from those experiences to the academic realm. I know that poses some implications because somebody mentioned earlier, it depends on what teacher. But I think if we put that leadership notion forward and with some key supports, that it really is an opportunity to leverage that and bring that student voice with support, with academic and discourse support into the classroom.
Also, I can ask for summer, if you're looking, if you have some title money or any budget available, there is a strong program out of Harvard called Reads for Summer Learning. It's called Reads for Summer Learning. And here you actually target students and they receive 8 books in the mail over the summer that are matched to their reading level and interest level. And along with each book, students receive a trifold paper that leads them through pre-reading activities and post-reading comprehension activities. And then students are asked to mail the postage prepaid back. I can post that. That's called Reads for Summer Learning. It's from Harvard. I think it's a pretty inexpensive program that you could do for summer. It has randomized control trials behind it and shows pretty good impact. That's one strategy you can try over the summer if you have some, if you're really concerned around loss around literacy. And if you have targeted students that you want to hit with that, that might be something that is, that might be pretty easy to implement. So I can post that link for you too also. So let's just see if there's any other questions here. Anybody else have any other questions you want to post in the chat?
And Magda, coordinating with other organizations, definitely new teachers. We've looked at, of course, the wonderful understanding language, of course. Really thinking about ways to bring all of the different aspects that are coming to the surface and try to make sense for emphasizing integrated instruction with targeted support.
So I don't see any more questions. So what we could do is just move on real quick. We have about a couple more minutes left. What we'd like to do. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that depending on your return scenario, you have the multiple ways to think about what needs to be included. And not to forget that there are 5 practices of exemplary leadership that really can tie together that philosophical approach. So we wanted to also leave you with these 5 practices. They've always been pinned to my wall and they resonate with me now because they're really derived from the notion that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And to me, this is an inclusive leadership time. It invites everybody to think broadly about the components of strong leadership, and it really hits all of the methods and modes that need to be considered at this time.
So, and also what I'd like to do is, if anyone would like to, schedule a meeting with me and Melissa through Zoom, we can have a more detailed conversation, a question answer. If you want to do that as an individual leader or as a team, we'd be happy to do that. You can just go onto the website where you got the downloads and just schedule a consult. We'll be happy to do that for you, and to have a little more in-depth conversation around what maybe you can do around these plans. When you think about the return and all the things that you need to do as a school leader, these 6 strategies you're going to have to really be nimble and ready for. We put together a decision matrix that we put in your handouts. So basically what this helps you do is helps you take strategic actions. And you can do this for any piece of the wheel that we just showed, but this one's centered on learning loss. It's going to require that you have responsiveness, nimbleness, agility, and waves of decision making as new information comes in. Because a lot of you shared that, like, it's uncertain what our future is. I can tell you, just from my experience in the last day or two, I was actually starting to feel comfortable being out and about, and all of a sudden we're in a hot spot, and now all of a sudden I'm uncomfortable. So we're going to have these waves, and it's going to require you to be nimble and have agility to make important decisions. So this matrix really kind of helps you think about insight. So how do you develop a learning loss strategy? And a sample action could be is you can ask your team to look at your current strategy through the lens of each scenario, remote learning, hybrid learning, or in person, and have each develop a list of questions or recommendations around that. The key here is you want to ensure that students have access to grade level instruction. Because if we remediate and try to fill in gaps that are missing, either through unfinished learning or a summer loss or a COVID loss, we will actually compound the problem and it will get worse. The other piece for insight is brainstorming ideas. How can we develop a new model or an approach to teaching and learning? And how can we see this new environment in the fall as an opportunity? So you could host a design thinking workshop and challenge teams to invent new ideas and solutions for each scenario. And then you can build this insight into actions by building capabilities. So how will you develop the expertise to act? And how do our school leaders understand each scenario and the implications of each scenario and their expectations? So you could self-assess on how well positioned your team is, and you can determine the competencies needed to be strengthened for you as a leader, as a leadership team, or as a teacher or support staff. And then how do you anticipate disruptions? So what disruptions can you anticipate that we're going to require a quick responsiveness and agility? And you can host a scenario writing workshop and identify plausible and pessimistic outcomes so you are ready when this encounters you. So that is in your packet. And again, if you need more information on the decision matrix or how to use it, but we want to give this to you as you think about scenarios that you're gonna be engaged with. So what we'd like to do before we end is, can you please share with us an action that you plan to complete in the next 24 hours? We would love to hear from you, and I hope, if this was helpful, we gave you the information needed to help you think of strategic actions to mitigate a potential COVID learning loss. So what are some actions that you plan to complete in the next 24 hours? We'd love to hear from you. Yeah, Bob Manley says, many districts are planning to bring in students in 2 separate groups, day A and day B. How do you organize curriculum for day in and day out process with parent cooperation? So that's going to be very interesting. When I did some of my district turnaround work, Baltz, who's actually on here, went with a 200-day calendar. And then I had another school district that actually went with an extended day calendar, and they had late start, early start days. And a day A and day B is interesting. So there's some really interesting work on to rethink how do you teach that? And I think Melissa, you pointed out to me that there is some models out there to think about this that maybe we're not grounded in as the grade level teacher, or maybe there's another framework we can think about instruction. So we can post some of that on our website as well, some ideas.
Wonderful.
Do you see any actions you see there, Melissa?
Yeah, definitely the discussion. Yeah, right. Emphasizing the positive things that have happened now came up a couple of times. The unintended outcomes of teachers working together more succinctly, to really build on that. And I think you'll have a lot of social emotional frameworks hitting you. It's really about how it's integrated into that learning structure. So it's not separate from, that it's integrated in, and that we don't have time for groups of students away from grade level learning. That this is really an opportunity to accelerate with support and really work toward learner autonomy.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We had some family, friends, really close colleagues, and we hope this was beneficial to you. We tried to put together as many resources as we could to help you with the unprecedented challenge in front of you. And again, we are available if you would like to talk to us and kind of have some more in-depth conversations with that. We plan to come to you with some more topics from experts around the wheel that we talked about around the return. And then we also want to engage in some lunch and learns with you and interview different leaders around the country about what they're doing and how it's going, so we can get all this information out to you. So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Thank you for the support, and please enjoy the rest of the week and stay safe. So I'm going to end the broadcast, and I just want to thank everyone so much again. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
All right.